Thank you for listening to Life on Gabriola from Gabriola CoopRadio. My name is Ken Zakreski. Today we're celebrating Facebook Free Day. Remember, this is a personal choice. Don't try to inflict cold turkey on anyone, for sure. If you haven't already taken one day away from Facebook this year, we encourage you to take today. Always concerned for your safety, I will be posting resources on Facebook use on our Facebook group from a health perspective. Today, February 28th, Facebook Free Day. And for your reflection, we are pleased to welcome Deborah Matheson, Chair of VIU's Psychology Department, for a discussion on Facebook use benefits and harms. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming on a snowy day in Mill Bay. Questions on Facebook are diverse, more over the 30 minutes we have today in order to discuss. The topic seems to have a lot of coverage online. I was beginning to think there wasn't really a public health treatment on it. I did trip into Scholar and found that the area has been studied for some time. And I'm looking for a method to understand how we humans kind of communicate with each other, and see you have published on dialogue. Because face-to-face dialogue is our first and most common form of communication, or at least it was until the 90s, can we use it as a prototype to evaluate other forms of communication like Facebook? And can the design of new communication systems benefit by using face-to-face dialogue as both a standard and a source of solutions?
You know, that's what we do. Exactly. Yes. So I have been studying communication since the 90s, I suppose, but I've kind of stopped. It's not my area now, but I'm here to share the little bit that I know. And I was part of a research lab in graduate school at the University of Victoria, where the whole focus was studying communication, both from a verbal and nonverbal standpoint, and trying to ascertain how much was contributed by each of those dimensions. In fact, we ended up adding a third dimension when we were talking about the best ways to communicate. Shall I keep going? We know that everyone knows, I think, we've got verbal communication, so using our words. Nonverbal communication, however, is extremely important. And there's many pieces to that. And in fact, when we are using our words, when we are linked to someone else simply by email or chat or whatnot, we tend to add nonverbals to make sure that what we are saying is understood. The third dimension is the collaborative dimension, and that's something that you miss out on when you're not having a face-to-face sort of conversation. We call them back channels. So I'm looking at you right now, and I'm getting some feedback. I can tell that you're with me, you're paying attention. And when I look at my students, I can tell whether they're with me, whether they're looking at me or they have dazed, confused expressions. But when we have an everyday conversation, we'll just, those little things we call back channels. So we do know that the person is still with us. It's also interesting because when we have those conversations, we tend to look away, but then we look back to, are you still with me? And then we'll look away again and carry on. But we're always checking in. So if we are not face to face, it becomes far harder to check in. And although we've been communicating for, since the moment we're born, we know that we're still not perfect at it, because I'm sure everyone can come up with a situation where they thought they had communicated their wants or desires to the partner or the roommate or what have you, and what you expected to happen didn't happen. Whether you're talking about, taking the garbage out, or I just had that with my son. I said, I was going on a trip and I said, can you take the garbage out? And he looked at me funny. And I thought that was strange. And he's in his 20s, so it's, no big deal. And it was a Friday, and he was just perplexed, but I thought he was, anyway. So he took the garbage out to the curb, and on a Friday night, of course, they don't pick the garbage up on Saturday. And he calls me the next day. It's like, Mom, nobody else has the garbage. I said, oh, I just meant from under the sink to the garage. Anyway, we are not experts yet at communication, although we do try extremely hard. So if we are looking to how we've communicated and we have these face-to-face interactions, well, in the olden days, our other means of communication was snail mail. And although some people still do that, it's not the norm. You might do so for special occasions. Yeah, yeah. And then you can keep that. But if you're wanting an answer to a question, you're not getting it back very quickly. So over time, we've seen the invention of things like email, and that was amazing because you could get a response almost immediately, not exactly immediately. And then from there, we had this thing develop where you could both be on the same screen and they would pose their question and then we would pose our answer and perhaps another question. So it was more immediate in that sense. From there, we've seen that when we are communicating in those ways, again, there's more opportunity to be misunderstood. I know Linda Coates was someone who did research related to irony. And if you are, trying to be funny, you have to be really careful when you are communicating via text or email or what have you, when it's only that print form. And we know that now. And if it's somebody you know really well, you might not add the LOL, the emoticon at the end. But more likely than not, so as not to start a squabble, how dare you say that to me, or what have you, we have people adding something, the LOL, or, pick your emoji. But if we look at the development over time, so we had this communication that developed via email. We could add, funny punctuation, lots of exclamation marks. Emoticons were the first things that were developed where, you use your colon and your parentheses. And then from there, we've developed emojis and now we have memojis. So we're definitely improving that nonverbal aspect of communication. And again, it's always to help us in an efficient way, but making sure that what we say is understood.
Are we using face-to-face dialogue as a standard?
I think we are. And when,
or is it widely accepted? Is it widely accepted, I guess?
I'll say it is the best way. And when we are not able to do that, we find ways to try and replicate components that are normally present in face-to-face dialogue in whatever means of communication we are currently using.
So Facebook is just now getting into video live, I guess, for our group, and other people are using it. Zoom has, of course, been around like for a couple of years heavily now since the pandemic. And the ability to kind of relate at a more normal, like it's face-to-face dialogue, is kind of coming together. Now, I know there's been lots of examples of misunderstanding on Facebook. I've moderated discussions where people were arguing the same point and they couldn't communicate well. I'm just wondering, do you see, I'm asking you to look forward here, do you see where this is going to lead? Are we going to be able to communicate better using text, audio, and video? I mean, when you look at the postcards, telephones, fax machines, Zoom, and then I guess the new thing is Meta. Are you happy with the evolution of this face-to-face dialogue for standards of communications? Is psychology happy with it? I mean,
I think technology has allowed us to get closer and closer to having that face-to-face dialogue, even when we are not in the same space. We're in the same virtual space, but we're not in the same space. So I think we've come a really long way, and I'm not sure how we're going to get much closer. Virtual reality, being able to reach out and touch someone on the screen, I'm not sure.
Okay, so the future we'll get to that. Now, getting specifically now to Facebook and kind of where we wanted to go with it. Now we started to see the deficits of where some of the problems can occur is the actual communication can be impeded by the medium. So generally social media and specifically Facebook, can you speak a bit hurtful or harmful to our well-being? I know I've experienced where I just can't do Facebook anymore. I can't type anymore. I can't email anymore. I remember when we were putting on the radio conference on Gabriola, I just couldn't email anymore. I just had to phone people. Where are we with social media and the harms that it brings specifically to people and to the community in general? Can you speak to that?
When we talk about social media, I think we need to separate out two things. So we've said Facebook and we've also said social media. So social media in the literature is sometimes divided between the entertainment component and the communication component. So certainly in terms of the entertainment component, I don't think that's what you want to focus on here today. But there's not much to say that that is helpful to us in a lot of ways. In terms of the connection, it can be a positive. Part of our problem, however, is we're spending so much time on social media. Now, social media can be a positive if it is a way of reaching out or staying in touch with people. The dating sites and whatnot, different social support groups, what they can be is they can be a place to meet, and we'll see that many of those relationships will evolve into face-to-face relationships, and then you will have those interactions. But just in terms of Facebook, we see Facebook being used because we all do have this need to belong, and we also have a need to engage in self-presentation. So what, we want to project a positive image most of the time. And I know we use that phrase, if you look to Facebook or other things, you will see the highlight reel. Now, what is interesting is Jeff Hancock was a UVic undergrad. He's now a professor at Stanford University in communication. And a lot of what he looks at, and it's kind of evolved from what we had done at UVic, is deception. And there's not a lot of outright lying that is taking place on Facebook. But people in some respects will misrepresent themselves just a little bit because they are only showing that highlight reel. And now, there are, not only can you pick the best angle, and there's filters and all of those things, which I probably should be, but I'm not familiar with. But when you have something that's documented like that, people can fact check it a little bit more. So what does that lead to? I mean, it can be great. It can be great with that connection. I know during the pandemic, I was in touch with more often with many of my relatives who live in another province. And it was great because we would get together every other Friday night, and we called it the Fam Jam. So I come from a musical family, and then people who weren't part of the family joined. And it was a really great way to connect. But at the same time, I have students in my office who have been too stressed and they can't get their work done. And what's happening? Well, I have to find something to post to show that my life is exciting. And it really is anxiety provoking for them. So that person was using Instagram. There's so many platforms now. Even our students, well, I'll tell you first, there was a study at UBC that was looking at Facebook usage. And so this was done a while ago because most students, the 20-year-olds don't tend to use Facebook anymore. But this was done a little while ago. And what they found was the first year students who were using Facebook were the students who tended to be quite lonely. So they were using it as a way to try and connect with others, kind of filling in that loneliness using the best means that they thought they had at that time. And we do see also that people who passively interact with Facebook and other things do not derive the benefits that connectivity, as opposed to the people who just scroll and they're just looking to see what happens in other people's lives. Now, the third and fourth year students had a very different experience because they had been at the school long enough that they had already developed friendships with others. And so this was a point of connection for them. And when the pandemic started, was the first time I heard about students doing this, when we went online and our classes were all via Zoom. Students were creating connections on another platform called Discord. And they did this spontaneously. And to my knowledge, every single class has a Discord group where the students can go and connect. I missed the class. Do you have the notes? I can't answer the review question. Does anybody else know the answer? That sort of thing. So again, what are they doing? They're finding ways to connect with each other using the technology that we have now. So yeah, back to that face-to-face communication, or as close as we can get. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and
Or
it
give
brings
me
up a
another?
bunch of questions about practicing, and I had an interesting event yesterday, and I just kind of want to relate it to social media use because interpersonal meetings were reduced for the last 2 years. I mean, we were kind of isolated. I mean, we were nicely isolated, but I noticed yesterday on Facebook, I asked where I could find some pickleball paddles. And it's a kind couple offered up their paddles for us to try out to use. So I brought them a bottle of wine and went to pick up the racquetball paddles. And I found my small talk ability is just gone. Like I think it was babbling on incoherently about something. And I realized that the practice skill of interpersonal communication, of which I used to have a pretty good rapport. I used to be able to do small talk all the time, and I guess I just noticed that it is. So, what is it taking away, other than the obvious? Is there any sort of insight you can give us on what we're losing by using this medium so often to communicate? Is there any insight you can give on exercises we could do, or things we should practice, or definitely I need to go out more?
Yeah, well, that's it, right? Because the art of conversation is an art that takes practice. So if we are simply emailing, we have time to think about what we want to say. And yeah, we see that age group where they're, just coming out of high school, going into university, they really haven't interacted with others as much. So it's hard for them. They also haven't been writing exams in high school, and therefore preparing them. I actually was teaching a group of Australians in the month of January. They flew up and took this class with me, and we were going over the course syllabus, and they said, "Are these like closed book exams?" And they just hadn't done a closed book exam in years, they had said. So that also is a skill that they needed to focus on again. They had lost that. So it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Communication is an art. It is something we know some people are better at it than others, and we know we can also get better at it with practice. Related to the discussions, let me tell you, the person who was in charge of that research lab, Jen Bavelis, she just passed away a month or two ago. But she said every conversation to her was like a fishing expedition, because what you are doing when you sit down with that person is you're trying to find common ground. So you bring up all of these subjects and see what you have in common. Do you have kids? Do you play sports? Do you play pickleball? So if you can find that thing you connect on, then you can go down that path and have that conversation.
And then, okay, so that's clear to me. That's pretty clear. Now, getting onto social media use, as it looks like it's here to stay. This is not, as my brother-in-law once said, a passing fad. The internet is here to stay. The medium is going to change, I guess, and evolve over time. We've got the Broadcasting Act will maybe change social media use in Canada. And I'm just thinking about the generations that are growing up. What are sort of the impacts of social media use on children that everyone should be aware of, and maybe they aren't? Is there any sort of guidance you can provide there?
Yeah, we know that it can be negatively impactful on children. We have done research on this, not me, but others. They did a study in Ontario that were looking at the usage of children right from the ages of 2 to 18 to see how, and they were talking about, TV and social media screen time. So they were looking at all of those different things. And what they found was that those who use that social media were more likely to be depressed or have higher levels of depression, higher levels of anxiety, and also inattention. And those who we haven't talked about, but and I don't want to talk too much about it, but I'll just say that those who experienced or spent a lot of time video gaming, that was associated with, again, higher levels of depression and irritability, but also higher levels of hyperactivity and we'll say bad behavior. Okay. So it doesn't seem to have a positive impact. I think especially the entertainment portion, but one of the courses that I teach that I don't think that I've mentioned is positive psychology. And we know how impactful it can be to spend time in nature. And if you're on the screen, you're not spending time on nature. And that's something that we need to do. As well, when we're on the screen, unless you're playing some of those old Wii games, you're not moving around too much. And physical activity is also hugely beneficial for us. And that's something that we'll miss out on.
Move
I'll
to
just maybe add another,
sorry,
just another interesting fact that I came upon. And, if we talk about addiction to any of these social media platforms or just to your phone in general, yes, huge variability from like single digits up to 40% I've seen, but it is double in collectivist societies. So there's been a lot of research on this in China, for example, and the use of social media is far more addicting there, perhaps because very, very generally we are taught to be independent. We are more independent. That's kind of what is dictated in our culture. But if you define yourselves by your connections with others and you're not able to connect person to person, it makes sense that you're wanting to spend more time on social media. So again, can be potentially more problematic there.
So we're talking about 2 out of the 10. One of the facts I read was about 2 out of 10 people in North America are going through some form of addiction at some point in their life to social media and the telephone in general, the new telephones. So that's a substantial amount of people. And I'm just kind of wanting, again, to bring it to the Facebook group that we operate on Gabriola. And I'm just wondering, dopamine, like it seems to be the hit you get from likes on Facebook. Is interacting with people on a visual platform like Facebook groups, where you're discussing an issue of the day, be it the busing of children to a high school or the ferry's late, or is it the same sort of reaction to yourself? Do you feel the same way when someone comments to your question or comment, as opposed to a like on a picture you put of a holiday? Let's say you put in your social feed. Like, is there a difference in the feeds? And I'm also wondering, I'm a lot on Facebook doing moderation, sometimes more than others. When you bring a goal into it, I got to go in, I got to deal with it and get out. Is there different sort of aspects to the addiction component of social media and how you use it?
Okay, I find this on the web. First, there are
sorry, my Google has just picked up my.
That's okay.
Turn that off.
It's not something that I am that familiar with. I know that it is supposed to be very rewarding when we get a lot of likes. That means people are in fact paying attention to what we have to say. So maybe it feels, because we do have that need for belonging. Therefore, if people are liking things, then we have that feeling of affiliation with others. But again, just in terms of the passive versus the actual engagement where you are posting things, it's the passive that is thought to be so detrimental, right? Because you really are just scrolling through things.
Okay, so active use of social media is distinct from just sitting there and scrolling by.
It is, because if you're actively doing it, you are connecting with other people. So if you're just scrolling, there's no connection with others. No one is, well, if you're not posting anything, nobody can say that they like, and they can give you that affirmation that you are a person who is valued and loved or anything like that, because nobody's had the opportunity to like. And at the same time, if you are not doing anything with anyone else, it's like you don't exist. So you're not getting that need to belong. If you do connect with someone else just by like, they know that you are being thought of, or they are being thought of. Mhm.
Okay, so lots going on there. I'm just trying to unpack a bit of that now, and we don't have time to really fully unpack it. And I hope you will accept an invitation to a longer, when you have some more time to do another interview on this interesting subject to me anyway. I hope other people enjoy talking about social media. So the use of social media can be done responsibly. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I'd really like to highlight a study that was recently done by one of our students. She's now a graduate student at the University of Victoria. So she is interested in cognitive processing. And one of the things that we've often known, this is why we get 15-minute coffee breaks, is that if we are cognitively engaged in a task, if we take a rest from that task, we usually come back more refreshed. So she had a simple task where you're scrolling and you're looking for a particular letter, and every time you see it, you're pressing a key. Well, she found students who were nomophobic, which is the term in the literature you use for if you are, no mobile phone makes you anxious. So definitely these people are addicted. So she had people who were addicted to their phones, people who were not. And then for the addicted people, she again divided them in half. Half of them took a break and they could look at their phone. The other half took a break and she had taken their phones away from them. So they had to find something else to do. And then the control group, those students were not nomophobic. So again, they could look at their phone on the break or not. So if you are not addicted, taking that break is super, super helpful because, you become rejuvenated and you come back to the task and you're going to be better at it. You're going to be more accurate when you're engaged in that. Now, the students who were nomophobic, when they could not look at the phone, that made them more anxious. And as a result, they perform more poorly. So in that situation, they needed, in that 15 minutes, it actually wasn't that long in that situation, but they needed to connect with their phone to make sure everything's okay or to comment on something. So yes, we absolutely are very much addicted. But what are some of the things that we can do? Well, turning your phone off, when you go to bed and having particular hours. A friend of mine is a clinical psychologist, and once she gets into family time, the phone is away. Everything is away. She is present, and that's what we want to be. We want to be present with the people we are with. So it's the worst case scenario is us spending time on our phone, ignoring other people in the real world. If we're spending time on our phone because we're not maybe in a situation at the moment where we can engage with other people outside face-to-face or in a building face-to-face, then it's advantageous. But the worst case scenario is not partaking in face-to-face relationships, face-to-face interactions.
Well, I wanted to get into introversion and extroversion on social media. I wanted to talk a bit about that, but we're kind of running out of time. And I know you have a job. I'm retired, so I'm going for a bike ride after this.
I have to go shovel snow before I go to my job. Yeah.
Life of snow. Okay, well,
so, maybe can I end on one more thing? And please. That is that there have been studies where they have forced people to put their phone away, not engage in Facebook for a week, for example. And those who are in that situation compared to a control group will give higher ratings of their own life satisfaction and express more positive emotions. So there is evidence to suggest we need to put that technology away.
So it's not permanent harm. We're not harming ourselves other than the lack of being able to converse with people. I'd pick up pickleball rackets from paddles. Social media isn't really destroying us as much as inhibiting us.
Well, let's say inhibiting us. I will say the data is not there yet to see. I mean, who knows? Some people might only be communicating via social media. I don't know. So we never say never, right? Okay. But generally speaking, just take a break.
And like any poison, some people can live on it. So, okay, well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I want to state our appreciation to Deborah Matheson, chair of VIU Psychology Department, who came and spoke on Facebook use and social media in general. And hopefully we can get you back again sometime for a longer sit down and chat.
Thank you. I'd enjoy that. Okay.
Okay, well, talk to you
Take care.
soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.